What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Andy, and on this channel we talk about audio, video, and tech. And in this week's episode, we are checking out the FX30 from Sony. Let's get into it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the new year, 2023. We officially live in the future. I hope everybody had a good holiday. I figured let's start the new year off right with a new video talking about a new camera, which is the FX30 from Sony. In this video, we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, the ugly. If you're like me and you were interested in this camera, you've probably already watched about 100 YouTube videos talking about how amazing this camera is. And while it is a great camera, it does have some serious limitations and some serious drawbacks that I think we need to talk about before you run out and purchase this camera. And that's what this video is going to do, because I am not a sponsored YouTuber. Sony doesn't know I even exist. This is a completely unbiased review of this camera. Let's start the video off with one thing, right? All cameras are good cameras anymore. In the right hands, anybody can create amazing content. Your camera on your phone is phenomenal. And I've seen so many cell phone videos that look like they were shot on big budget cameras, and it was just a small sensor cell phone camera. So let's just get that out of the way right now. All cameras are good cameras. With that being said, not all cameras fit into everyone's workflow. And that's really what we're going to talk about in this video, is the FX30, if it might be a good camera to add to your arsenal, or if you should skip on it, save up and get something else. That's really what we're going to be talking about. So again, I bought this camera with my own money from B&H. No discounts, no special deals, nothing like that. So let's talk about the things that I do like about the camera, because it is a good camera and there are things that I really like about it. The first thing I love about this camera is the ergonomics. The way that it feels in your hand is phenomenal. It's got this really nice deep grip. Man, it just feels awesome. It's really easy to hold. All the buttons are laid out exactly where you'd expect. So you've got all of your record buttons, white balance, ISO buttons on top there. So when you're shooting, it's easy to change those on the fly. You've got quick access to all the buttons on top. Your thumb is in a perfect location to hit all the buttons on the back. So the way this camera is laid out is phenomenal. Sony, keep up the good work. Lay more cameras out in this fashion. I like that it doesn't have an EVF. I hardly ever use an EVF when shooting video. For me, that's more of a photo tool. I know there are video shooters that love to use the EVF. I'm just not one of them. The articulating flip out screen is really great. The resolution on the screen is fantastic. Even though it's a small screen, I still feel comfortable pulling focus with it if I've not brought an external monitor. And the menu system, having the main menu with all of the common settings that you'd be changing frequently, is laid out really, really well. That's something that I've always loved the Blackmagic cameras for, is it's easy, it makes sense. That main screen in the menu system feels a lot more like a Blackmagic menu. Everything's right there. You can just touch on what you want to change and change it. So again, form factor and menu system is just fantastic. I really, really enjoy that. The downsampled 6K to 4K video looks absolutely incredible. It's tack sharp. And when you punch in, you don't lose a ton of detail. So even though you're not getting 6K resolution, I think that you still can punch in post and still get really usable footage because of how sharp that footage actually is. All right, so those are some things that I really enjoy about this camera. What I'm going to do now for the rest of the videos, I'm going to actually film the rest of this video with the FX30 so you can see the difference. The first part of this video is filmed on the Lumix S5, and now we're going to flip over. We're going to go from a full frame camera to an APS-C camera. I'm going to do my best to match the focal length, and we're going to go ahead and film the rest of it with this, and I'm going to tell you the things that I don't absolutely love about it, some things that I find are a downside. Stay tuned. All right, guys, I am now shooting on the Sony FX30. You're going to notice a few things that are a little different right off the bat. One, the colors are probably slightly different, as I'm shooting in S-Log 3, and on the Lumix S5, I'm shooting in V-Log. I will try to match them as close as I can in post, but there's probably going to be some differences in the colors, probably and the skin tones as well. You're also going to probably see a little bit more sharpness in the image, as this is a 6K oversampled image downsampled to 4K. So it's going to be a little bit crisper, and you're going to see a little bit more detail probably on my face as well. And you're also going to notice the autofocus, which I do not have on the S5. The S5 does have autofocus, but it is pretty unreliable, so I typically never use it. I just put it in manual focus. So in the videos, you'll see if I hold something up, it doesn't adjust focus. Whereas here I can hold my hand up, it focuses, put my hand down, back on my face. So the FX30 has fantastic autofocus, just like all the Sony cameras. So there's no issue with that at all. And this right here is probably the perfect scenario for the FX30. And by that, I mean, if you're shooting in an environment with controlled lighting, such as a studio where I have key lights and background lights, this right here is the perfect scenario for this camera. I'm able to shoot at the base ISO of 800. I'm able to get my exposure set properly for S-Log3, which is about 1.7 stops over exposed. And I'm able to adjust my lighting accordingly to get proper exposure. So this is the ideal scenario for this camera. That is why you'll hear a lot of people on YouTube say this is a fantastic B camera and not a main camera. So that was the big thing that I wanted to find out for myself is, could this be a main camera? For me, in my workflow, I have looked at all the scenarios, and for me, there's no way that the FX30 can be a main camera for me. I'm not saying can't be a main camera for everyone, but I'm saying the things that I shoot and the situations that I'm in when I'm shooting, this camera does not work well for run and gun shooters that shoot in multiple environments with different lighting that sometimes cannot be controlled. So things like, I shoot a lot of like small business footage. So I'm in usually a client's space. If I'm shooting a commercial or a talking head, I might be able to bring in some lighting. And in other situations, I just show up and I shoot with the lighting that I have available to me. Now, this camera would not do well in that situation because this camera needs an incredible amount of light into that sensor to properly expose S-Log3 footage. Being that you have to overexpose S-Log3 to get proper exposure when you do color space transform, getting enough light into that sensor at even the second base ISO of 2500 is really, really difficult sometimes. And requires a lot of light. And in some of those situations, you may just not have enough light to properly expose. I think that Sony would have done better to take that dual base ISO if they could have extended that second base ISO up to, 5,000, 6,400 even. 6,400 would have been a great option on this camera. But 800 and 2500, those ISO ranges are still so low for low light environments that it is really difficult to get a clean image using S-Log3. So if you're somebody that shoots music videos and you like more of a moody look and you don't like a lot of light in the scene, this is going to be a problem for you. If you shoot wedding videography and you're shooting at receptions where there's, dance lights and the house lights are off, this is going to be really difficult to shoot with because the image is going to be very noisy, even at that 2500 ISO. And to expose properly, you need to go well beyond the 2500 ISO, probably up to 6400, 10,000, 12,000. And that is going to bring a lot more noise into your image, which you are then going to have to denoise in post, which adds an extra step to your workflow. And it also is really taxing on your CPU. So that has been my experience with shooting with this camera over the last couple of weeks, is it does really well shooting scenarios like I'm in now. But the second I'm walking downstairs in my house and maybe there's no lights on, just the lights coming in from the outside, this thing sucks. I'll be really honest. I'm even shooting on a 16mm 1.4 lens, so a really fast prime lens. It still really struggles in low light. I have not found it really very usable. You could make it work if you've got a few clips that are a little noisy, but for me, it's been most of the clips are pretty noisy. So just know that if you are not somebody that typically denoises their footage, this is probably not the camera for you. If you're somebody that shoots in environments where you can't always control the lighting, this is probably not a camera for you. If you're shooting in a well-lit studio, this might be a great B cam to your main camera. The other thing that I really don't like about this camera is the 4K 120. Now, that was a spec that I was really excited about because up until now, that has been a spec that has been reserved for much more expensive cameras like the A7S III, the FX30. You know, those cameras shoot 4K 120 on a full frame sensor with only a 1.1 crop. So you're getting plenty of light still for that 4K 120 footage. With the FX30, when you put it into 4K 120 mode, it does crop in another 1.5 times on top of the 1.5 crop that the APS-C sensor is. So now you've got a very small area of sensor that you're using, so you lose a lot of sharpness and you introduce a ton of noise into your footage. I have not had any usable 4K 120 footage out of this camera without heavy denoising. And then again, I'm bogging down my workflow waiting for those clips to render out because I have to do a ton of denoising in post. For me, it is a much better option to shoot 1080p 120. I'm not getting that crop. I think the image looks just as sharp as the 4K 120, maybe a little more soft, but you can again always bump up the sharpness in post. And to me, that's a much more usable image because then you're keeping your original framing. You're not cropping in and having to use a wider lens. So do not buy this camera for the 4K 120. It will be a disappointment. If you're somebody that just wants, 4K 24 and 4K 60, great. It has that without a crop, without an additional crop, and works just fine. But again, these are some serious downsides for me. The dual base ISO isn't big enough. The 4K 120 is really noisy. And these are the specs that are really selling this camera. And for me, I wish I would have known a little bit more about those specs before purchasing this camera. But again, in this environment, it works fine. And that's probably what this camera is going to be, is going to just take over being my main YouTube camera and maybe a vlog camera. And that is about it, because I'm not going to try to shoot in anything other than 4K 24. And I'm not going to be trying to shoot in low light conditions. But for here, this is perfect because I get my nice, fast autofocus, and it works great in a well-lit environment. So I'm going to stop rambling. I could probably go on for like days talking about this. I hope you found this video helpful. I appreciate anybody that watched. And if you did find this information helpful, please like and subscribe down below. The main idea of this channel is I talk about audio, video, and tech equipment at different price points, and then try to give you my real world opinion on it so you know if it's a good buy for you or not. So that's my main goal in this channel. And like I said, if I'm providing any value or helping out, I definitely appreciate the like and the subscription. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you later.